Last year I played a game called Federation Commander, a game of tactical combat in space in a sci-fi universe based on the original Star Trek franchise. Kirk, Spock, the original Star Trek, but also the only Star Trek really, because without those iconic characters, to me it is not Star Trek, but that's my personal opinion. Federation Commander is a game that I enjoyed very much, but also a very complex game, even though it is in itself a streamlined version of an even more complex game, Starfleet Battles, and that game is known as the Advanced Squad Leader of Space Combat, incredibly complex and detailed. Federation Commander's game is a game that is still detailed, is still fairly advanced, not a gateway game that takes a while to teach and to play, but definitely more streamlined. Now GMT came out with a game that definitely looks like a rib coming out of Federation Commander and magically turned into a game of its own. The game is called Talon, and even if you look at the graphics on the cover and then inside the game, it really is reminiscent of the graphics, of the illustrations of Federation Commander. Just check on Board Game Geek, look for any module in the Federation Commander system and you'll know what I mean. Talon is a game of space combat where players control fleets, or in any case groups of varying size of starships that go and fight against each other. Each starship is represented by a large corner. This is the actual size, pretty impressive already. You move on a board, you spend energy, you change the speed, and you fight against each other, which sounds like a simplification, but well, that's what more war games are, move and attack. A sci-fi war game with some pretty interesting ideas. The background story feels a little generic. There is one, probably, that I think I read, maybe, but I forgot. The background story really is not all that important. It is pretty much red starship versus blue ones, or just say amber and teal, amber and blue starships, which frankly is not a problem if then mechanically around such a theme and a little bit generic, such a thin and a little bit generic theme, there is enough stuff to keep you interested game-wise. If the game is mechanically rich, who cares if the theme is a little thin? Talon by GMT. Let me show you how the game works. This is the board of the game. May not look too fancy at first sight, but hey, this is open space combat. What do you expect? This is the background. This is where the confrontation takes place. So the map, all maps of space combat game more or less look like this one. But hey, it is a mounted board, so this is pretty neat. And also the game comes with another board, a smaller one, which you can place side by side with this one, maybe to play larger scenarios or simply to represent the extra space. Remember, this is just a sector of the universe, not the end of the world, not the end of the universe. These edges should not represent the end of the universe. So if the action is such that the ships in the battle are flying off the edge of the board, you can add another board to represent that extra space, or you can also simply move all of the ships and everything on the board back towards the center of the board, making sure that you keep the relative position of everything to everything else. And that also is another way of representing infinite space within the constraint of physical components. Now, as for the game itself and the ships that are involved in it, units in the game are represented by these counters that represent individual ships. These counters are large, look awesome, and they are, as you can see, a few colors to represent the different factions, and they are coated. This is very important because during the game you will simply write on them to update the stats as the action proceeds. That is super neat, so all the information is where you need it to be, which is on the board. And actually, since we're here, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the information on the counters. Which one should I choose? I don't know. They're all good. Here we have 4 areas on the edges of each ship, and these are the shields. These are the parts of the ship that are damaged first. They do not give actual damage to the ship, but you need to eliminate all of the shields on at least one side of the enemy ship before you can hit. So you need to go through a destroy shield to hit the ship itself. You simply cross off each box as you inflict damage on an opponent. By the way, these are the markers that come with the game. 2 of them come with the game. I frankly prefer to use these markers that do not come with the game. They are usually can be purchased together with dry board erase. You see they have a little magnet here, so you can attach it to the whiteboard. The advantage is that you can use them both to write and then also to erase. You have the eraser right there in the same area, in the same tool. Pretty neat. I mean, I find it very convenient. Back to us. These red and yellow bars represent weapons. You consume the energy of these weapons, so when you're firing them. In this game, a charged weapon is one that has all of the boxes in the corresponding bar crossed out. In other games, such as Federation Commander, is the opposite. You cross them when you use them. But here, if they're all crossed or marked somehow, the weapon is ready. When you fire it, then you drain it of power, and then you have to take off the boxes during the game to recharge them, and you can fire them again when they are charged. Here we have the hull. When there is a hit that goes through the shields and hits the ship itself, you mark damage on this track here, starting from the leftmost space. If then the leftmost visible space has numbers or symbols in it, is bad. So I took 2 hits, that means the leftmost is that one, and that means that there is a reduction in my stats. The 3 major stats in the game, whose value will fluctuate during the game, are this one here, which is power, which is the value that is modified by this penalty here, speed, and here rate of turn, how many axes you have to move in a straight line entering your front X before you're allowed to turn. So for example, if I have a 2 here, after I turn, I need to go straight for 2 hexes. One way is to place one of these markers here that come with the game. The rate of turn, a number of hexes equal to the rate of turn. So for example, here, I need to say move by 2 before I can turn, then I place a 2 there. Frankly, what I prefer to do, and it's also suggested in the rules, is to place the rate of turn marker on the ship itself. After I turn, after I move, I flip it, and after I move again, I remove it, so I know now that I can turn. When you turn by 1 hex side only, by 60 degrees only. Now, those 3 values, power, speed, and rate of turn, depend on the type of ship that you have. Here you have a very useful player aid that tells you the combinations. At the beginning of each turn, you will get to modify your speed by 1, and as you modify your speed, the other values will change too. Suppose, for example, that I am piloting a light cruiser which is going at speed 4. I decide to decrease the speed. As you can see, I also changed the other factors. It's easier now that I'm going more slowly to turn. I can turn more easily, and I'm directing more power from the speed parts of the ship, the ones that produce speed, to this area here, which is power, which is, let's say, a currency that you can spend to perform various actions. The game is divided in rounds, and each round is divided in 6 impulses. Each impulse has 2 players' turn. The players will be divided in an initiative player and the second player. Initiative player, of course, goes first, and here you have a marker that tells you which side goes first, which side has the initiative. During the game, the player without the initiative can try to steal the initiative, in which case you simply feed the marker to record that. So you move the marker here, first player goes, second player goes, and so on and so forth. Now remember, here there will be numbers like 3, 3, 2, 4, etc., etc. You see these numbers here. All that means is simply that the ship will perform an action when the number that, one of the numbers that are here are visible on the corresponding impulse. For example, suppose that the ship here has 2 and 4 there. Has a 2 and 4. Now I am the first player, so I go through all of my ships, and I know that this turn the ship will be able to move because it has 4 on the speed, so I simply move it. Ships that have a 4 of speed will move 4 times during a round. In fact, you will see the number 4 is indicated 4 times on this track. So I move here, move here, move here, and move here. If I were going a speed of 3, I would move only 3 times, and it would be in these impulses here. Pretty neat, huh? If you played Federation Commander, this is the same thing. Certain actions will allow you to act a certain number of times per impulse, and there's a schedule will tell you which impulses exactly are the ones where you will be able to perform your action. 5, you'll be performing that thing many times. That thing, because the same rule applies to movement and to power. When the number of the power of a ship is in the box of the impulse that is being played, the ship moves. When the power number of a ship is in the impulse that is being played, then the ship gets to perform an action. Well, you get to perform an action for the ship to be more accurate. So this ship is going pretty fast at 4, but only has 2 points of power. So there will be only 2 times in the turn where that ship will get to spend a point to perform actions. And here you have a list of the available actions that you can perform by spending the action point. Since we're talking about movement, actually, usually you move forwards, you can turn if there is no such a marker. You may also spend a point here, an action point, to purchase a side slip. You spend an action point to do so, you put that marker on the ship, and the next time that the ship moves, you can slip to the right or to the left without changing orientation. And then you simply remove this. So that's one of the actions you can purchase for power. Available actions include shield reinforcement. Oh, I like this very much. You simply take one of these markers corresponding to the impulse in which you are. There are different markers for different impulses. And you put it on your ship, making sure that you mark which is the shield of the 4 shields that you have that you are defending. Suppose we are reinforcing, suppose we are in impulse P, then I take the P and I decide to reinforce this one because, oh well, I see that there is a guy coming more or less in that direction. It looks like he is looking for trouble. You can have multiple shields up to a certain limit on your ship, and it's very important that you mark the shields with the letter of the impulse because the reinforcement expires. So basically, the next time that you'll go to an impulse with the same letter of your shield reinforcement, the shield reinforcement will be removed. That is, each shield reinforcements lasts exactly 1 round, no matter where you start. You start in D, it will end in D. You can also just remove them, which usually you do simply to replace them with a fresher shield. When you take damage to a certain shield, the shield reinforcement is removed first, and then the shield takes damage, and you record that by marking boxes on the shield. So basically, it simply represents an extra point of defense on the shields where you put the marker. Very important action. Actively charge yellow box. These are the yellow boxes of the weapons, so you can spend action points to recharge your weapons, but you cannot recharge the red boxes. These can only be recharged at the end of a turn. That means no matter how many points you pour into recharging your weapon, you won't be able to fire a weapon twice in the same round because you have to wait until the end of the round to charge a red box, and all weapons have at least a red box in their area that you use to take care to record the energy that they have. You can enable a side slip. You can power through a turn, so you simply reduce the number on the present marker recording when you can turn by 1. There's a situation, I spend a point to reduce the rate of turn from 1 to 2. So if I was there, do this, or simply flip the marker on the ship. I can charge a battery. Some ships, such as this one, have batteries. Then I can spend a point to mark that battery and pretty much store in that action point. And I can use it out of turn to perform an action. So I can spend that action point when my number of action points is not on the present turn. But still, only if you wouldn't be able to perform an action using action points otherwise. There's a rule that says you cannot spend more than an action point per single player turn. You may change or defend the initiative. If you are the non-initiative player, you may spend an action point pretty much to alter the tactical situation, well, to gain initiative. So you take a marker, you spend an action point, take a marker, and you put it on a ship. And the opponent that has initiative may choose to spend action points to defend, that is, to purchase these markers. At the end of an impulse, if the change markers on the board are in excess, there is a number that is higher than the number of defend marker, then the initiative changes, and the player that just won the challenge, the change initiative, becomes the new initiative and will go first next impulse. Also, the ships with missiles, but this is a little advanced, can redirect their missiles, and also bases and CV units can transmit action points to other units. But this is pretty much the basic idea. In a turn, your ships will move and or perform an action. You don't have to perform an action, of course. A very important action, of course, that is not, you need to spend things intrinsically, is to fire, is to attack your opponents. Now, here you have combat tables, and combat is simplicity itself. You have a die, you roll it on the table corresponding to the weapon that you're using, and you apply the results. In this, the game is really similar to Federation Commander, where you also have combat tables that change for each weapon, but those combat tables are much more complicated. Using phasers, then you simply roll the die, cross-reference with the distance that you are from your opponent, that you have between yourself and the opponent, and you apply the number of damage points to their shield, or if you're firing through a destroy shield, to the hull. Here, you're firing an antimatter torpedo, then you roll a die, and this time the result is not an automatic number of damage points that you inflict, but it is to determine whether you hit or not. You roll the die, and if you roll within that range, you hit, and you score the number of hit points. With motion gun, super powerful. It allows you to inflict 10 points of damage and also to displace the opponent. Again, you need to roll to see whether you hit or not. Missiles, so that there are markers that you put on the board and they will move, and they move at each impulse. Other weapons, other powerful stuff. Critical damage stable. When the ship takes enough damage that the next visible number has that orange symbol there, then your ship takes a critical damage. You roll 2 dice, and that determines the type of damage that you have to take, and you may have to place a marker on the ship to record that. Now, for the conclusions, let's be objective and talk about pluses and minuses. Let's start with the minuses. Done. Now, for the positives, oh gosh, there are so many positives. I love this game. Production-wise, this game is like, oh my gosh, they should show it to new generations of publishers so that they know what a good looking, good feeling, well-produced game looks like. You can see the love. There is love exuding from the box, shooting out like a phaser in space. You can see the love that the designer put in the product, and how that affected even the components, making the components really the kind of components that help the player be immersed in the story, be immersed in the adventure. The fact that you do not have to go through a lot of tables, you do not have to look through a lot of player aids. Everything is so economic and so well placed on the player aids. The fact that information is on the counter themselves, that's great. That's just like, it's a game changer. It seems like it's just a matter of production, but it's a production changer from, for example, Federation Commander, that simply changes the experience entirely. You're just sucked into the story, and the mechanical aspects, the procedural aspects, does not detract from the experience. The original Federation Commander, you had large player aids with the outline of the ship and a lot of boxes that you would need to mark, a lot of other adjustments. This really is a simplified and a miniaturized version of Federation Commander. To me, the affinities are impressive. If the game was designed without knowing Federation Commander, it would be a phenomenal case of multiple genesis of parallel evolution, which is possible. But having played both, to me, just the comparisons come to mind. And it feels like a miniaturized version, a bonsai version, which doesn't necessarily mean a version that is that looks all that different, just a version that is a little smaller, so it's more manageable. You can have one in your house, which you cannot maybe have with a big tree. You can have Federation Commander, but at least I find it hard to play. Now, you know how the game is, Federation Commander, so it's not hard to play in the sense that it's too difficult for me. It is hard to find the time to play because it takes a long time. If I'm introducing a new player, it's gonna be a pretty intense session of teaching, and then the player is gonna go take a while before really things click together. It's simply a game that I like, but I don't get to play very often. Talon is a miniaturized version, so it gives me pretty much most of the things that I like about Federation Commander, minus some of the detail, and it is a game that is playable. Again, here you see the love. The designer put in a game that really feels like it was meant to be exciting, immersive, and playable. A game that actually does hit the table. It's so fluid, it's so seamless, the experience of playing the game is so perfectly cohesive. I really like that so simple trade-off between power and speed, which you also have in other games of this kind, but it gives you flexibility, gives you actions, it tailors elements together in a way that makes perfect sense, and it presents you with a lot of challenges and options. Of course, you can shoot through the board, dashing from one side to the other, and the opponent is taking things more slowly, working on changing the overall tactical situation, getting initiative, doing all sorts of crazy stuff. You have a range of options that really gives you a lot of depth, a lot of tactical feel. Here the designer just got it right, I would say just right. If you were to subtract some elements from this design, maybe it would be a little too simple, maybe a little too abstract, but it just gets to that level where you have maximum economy, really incredible playability, really accessible game that you can teach very easily and play quickly in an hour, 2 hours, depending on the scenario, and yet you have depth, and yet you have decisions that are gripping, that are tough to make. Those die rolls, once you have set up a situation, if you planned well, if you executed things well, if you read your opponent well, you set up a situation where the die roll will influence things, of course, but will not feel like too random. I would say that the level of randomness here is one that affects you within a range that you have a lot of control on, based on your skills, based on your planning, based on your ability to read the opponent. Oh my Roddenberry. This is a great game. Talon by GMT. I loved it. I liked it. Yes, it's simpler than Federation Commander for the fans of Federation Commander out there, but I'm not saying this in a negative sense. When the advantages, when the trade-off is so delightful, the advantages are so prominent, because it is a game that may have less detail, but I will get to play more often and with more people, and to me that's pretty valuable too. You do not have friends that are interested in sci-fi, worry not, this game also works well as a solitaire game because there's no hidden information, and again, randomness is not too big, but there is enough there to keep the game interesting, even if you're playing both sides at the best of your possibilities. Talon, great game, and I hope the beginning of a system. As is, this is a box that comes with a lot of ways of playing the game, combining it with another game. There is a campaign game. There are the rules that I didn't talk about in my review, but you can add as you go along. Definitely a lot of stuff that can be done with the components and the rules that you find in the set, and it's all stuff that is fun, good, and absolutely exciting to play. Talon by GMT. I cannot recommend this game enough. Truly an excellent game.